Hey everyone, welcome back to Honest About the Irish. Final score from South Bend tonight: Notre Dame 42, Florida State 26. It's been 3 weeks. It seems like I haven't been talking to you guys in a while. It seems longer than 3 weeks, but thank you for joining me. Please like this video, and also those of you who are new, please subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it. And even if you don't like this, hit the thumbs down button. I really appreciate it as well. I like some feedback, folks. Maybe leave some comments as well. So tonight's score: Notre Dame again 42, Florida State 26. Notre Dame improves to 3-0. Florida State falls to 1-3. My gosh, I mean, Florida State, like where they were and now where they are now, it just, the state of Florida tonight had a very bad night in football. You know, Miami got killed by Clemson, which was not a surprise to me because Clemson is they're from a different planet. That's how great they are. And then Florida got beat up by Texas A&M tonight, and just a bad night for Florida. I remember when the state of Florida was the biggest thing in college football, especially Florida State. And from Florida State, where they once were, to now, it's just kind of, I wouldn't say sad, but it's different. It's seeing Florida State get beat up by the way they did tonight by Notre Dame's offensive line. You don't see that very much. And since Jimbo Fisher has left there and they won that national championship in 2013, you know, I had a couple good years since then. But once Jimbo Fisher left that team, that team has fallen apart and that program's fallen apart. And this happens in college football sometimes. You see it. You know, it's sad in a way. And I guess I should say it was sad, even though I tried not to say it, but because it is Florida State. I've never really been a big fan of Florida State or Miami growing up because they were always good and they always seemed to beat Notre Dame, except in 1993 when Notre Dame beat Florida State. And B-Man was at that game. And then Miami, of course, you know, another team from Florida I couldn't stand. They got beat up tonight too, and they were always good in the 90s, and they have not been good since then. You know, they were relevant a couple years here and there, and then they kind of fell through the floor, which they kind of did tonight. So state of Florida is not the same in Florida. I mean, people say that Central Florida is the team to beat in Florida, and you would never think that. That's just surprising. It's funny how college football works. But anyways, back to the game. Notre Dame just completely dominating on the offensive line tonight. I'm going to start off with the positives. Usually B-Man starts off with the negative stuff. I'm going to flip over a new leaf here, guys. Notre Dame had a total offense of 554 yards. They had 201 yards in passing. Florida State had 253 yards in passing. Now, Michigan fans would be like, well, Notre Dame won the game, but at least Florida State had more passing than Notre Dame. We got you there, or Florida State got you there, which is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And by the way, speaking of Michigan, did you guys see that game Thursday night when Tom Brady forgot that it was 4th down and he thought he could get an extra down? Now, where did Tom Brady learn how to count? And where did Tom Brady go to college? Oh, of course, the University of Michigan. So Tom Brady, you suck. I'm not even a Bears fan, but it's always good when Tom Brady loses because Tom Brady is a bitch who's a little crybaby when he doesn't get his way. And I do not like Tom Brady, and we don't ever give Tom Brady any credit on this channel too, even though he's won like a gazillion Super Bowls. But anyways, back to the game. Florida State had a total of 406 yards. Now, the reason why that is because Notre Dame's defense was a little sloppy tonight, and Notre Dame's tackling was a little sloppy. Now, I will get into that in the negative aspect, but for positive, Notre Dame's offensive line is really good. And we already knew going into the year they were going to be good. And I think, even on this channel, Honest About the Irish, where I'm 90% negative, I think Notre Dame might have one of the best offensive line in college football. Now, we'll see that against Clemson when they play them in November, and also North Carolina. Mac Brown has a good team down there in North Carolina. They've got a great rushing attack. That young kid today had over 200 yards rushing. North Carolina scares the shit out of me, man. That's the game that Notre Dame plays the day after Thanksgiving on Black Friday. So that's a game I'm going to circle that really is going to drive me nuts and really makes me a little crazy because, I don't know, and North Carolina looks really, really good. But for Notre Dame tonight, the rushing attack, and again, people always say an offensive line makes a rushing attack look great. And sometimes that's true. But when you have a rushing attack that's great, and you have an offensive line that's great, and you have a quarterback that throws the ball pretty good, and he has a good quarterback rating, you're going to have a pretty good team offensively. Now, let's look some stats over here, okay? Notre Dame's key running back, and I love him very much, Kyrie Williams. He's my favorite Notre Dame player on this team right now. 19 carries, 185 yards, 2 touchdowns. Chris Tyree, 11 carries, 103 yards, 1 touchdown. Ian Book even had an impressive night rushing. 9 carries, 58 yards, 1 touchdown. Of course, Ian Book went 16 for 25, 201 yards passing. 3 total touchdowns, 2 on passing, 1 on rushing. So, just very impressive overall with the offense. And Notre Dame is going to need to play that way against Clemson. Notre Dame is going to need to play that way against North Carolina. Their 2 toughest games on that schedule. And, I'm not even going to think about the Clemson game yet. I'm going to enjoy this. I'm going to enjoy this fun season. Notre Dame's 3-0 next weekend. Of course, they take on Louisville at 1:30 Central Time on NBC. So we'll just see how things turn out here. If Notre Dame, I hope they don't have a slip up, but you never know in college football. And I just love college football. I just love that you have quarterbacks who can run the ball for over 50 yards and have a touchdown, and pass the ball for over 200 yards and they have 2 passing touchdowns and do the RPO run pass option. And college football is so much better than the NFL. So much opportunities in college football with offensive, so many plays you can play. In college football, you have the mobile quarterback who also has a great arm. In NFL, you can do that. Eventually, the quarterbacks can get hurt. We've seen it so many times. This is the reason why I prefer college football, because you have players like Ian Book tonight who had a pretty impressive night rushing and passing with a great offensive line. So B-Man's game ball is going to go towards the offensive line. The whole offensive line deserves the B-Man's game ball tonight if they had one, because they were very impressive tonight. And that offensive line had so many holes pushed open that even Michael Moore could run for 200 yards with a couple touchdowns. That's how great that offensive line was tonight. So, they definitely get an A. And the offensive line tonight is the award winner for the B-Man is Mad Ball, or Honest About the Irish Ball, whatever you call it. Game ball. B-Man's game ball. So I just made it up tonight just to be funny. Now, let's get a little negativity here. Now, before I start talking about the negativity of stuff I did not like from Notre Dame tonight, I want to get into 2 things. And I never really cared for Mike Tirico. I think he's pretty much good at being a golf announcer for the Masters when it's on NBC. Sometimes, usually it's on CBS or ESPN. I think it's on NBC this year when they play it in November. I'm not sure, but Mike Tirico is a good golf announcer, and I don't even watch golf. But for some reason, and I know he's trying to be positive and upbeat to keep the other team's fans into the game when they're not having a good year, but it seems like to me that Mike Tirico gives every team too much credit that Notre Dame is playing. Like, even when a team is 1-2 or a team hasn't won a game yet, he blows that team up to make them seem like they're a juggernaut. Tonight, he kind of made Clemson feel like, he kind of made Florida State, to me, feel like they were Clemson. When Florida State is having a terrible year and they're not what they used to be, and they barely got past Jackson State last weekend. And the weekend before that, they got their brains beaten by Miami. Now, just imagine if they play Clemson this year, how bad that game's going to be. And, of course, Clemson destroyed Miami tonight and beat their brains in, which was no surprise. Now, I understand what he's doing. Like I said, he's trying to get the other team's fans into the game, trying to get you a little bit of input. But, dude, be a little bit criticize them a little more. Be honest. Be like me. But I get it. You can't be honest on TV like that. But it's kind of annoys me, and sometimes Mike Tirico, I just wish sometimes he would just stay quiet and let Tony Dungy. And by the way, Tony Dungy, I love Tony Dungy. He's so much better than Doug Flutie, because Doug Flutie sucked. Doug Flutie was like, by the way, Tom Brady. He didn't even know what down it was. That's how bad Doug Flutie was. And speaking of Tom Brady, wasn't that great on Thursday night when he lost to the Bears? And I'm not even a Bears fan, but Tom Brady is the biggest bitch in the NFL. And I never liked Tom Brady. Yes, I know he went to the University of Michigan, but the dude forgot which town it was, which was great. And I laughed my ass off. And he threw a little fit. He threw his helmet down. He started cussing. What do you expect? He went to Michigan. Of course he didn't know what down it was, because Tom Brady is a crybaby. And he went to Michigan. That's all you need to know. But please, Mike Tirico, just be quiet a little bit sometimes. I really appreciate it. So you can get Tony Dungy speaking there, because Tony Dungy knows his football, and he's very smart, and he has a very, very, very high IQ in football. So that was my first negative. My second negative is these college football games are way too long. They're over 3 hours, it seems like. If this game were to start at 8 o'clock, it'd still be going on right now. It's 10:57 right now, just a couple minutes before 11 o'clock. This game would be late in the third quarter right now if this game had started at 8. This game wouldn't be over until at least 11:45 midnight. These games are way too long. It seems like halftime in college football is like a half hour, especially Notre Dame games. In the NFL, I think they're less than 14 minutes. I think they're like 13 minutes at halftime in the NFL. I wish college football would do that. And also another thing I wish college football would do to speed up the game, okay, first downs. Every time there's a first down in college football, we know they stop they stop the clock for 5 seconds to reset the chains. You quit doing that, the games will speed up. Okay? I mean, that's a 3.5 hour game is too long for me. It's too long for B-Man. Now look, I'm tired. It's 11 o'clock right now, and Notre Dame was still playing. It was in the third quarter, and they were winning the same way they did against Florida State tonight. I'd be getting sleepy. And I would probably fall asleep in the middle of this podcast, and you guys would be like, what the hell's going on? Like, these games are way too late. I remember back in the day, Notre Dame played a game against Hawaii. I lived in Michigan, so it was East Coast time. That game didn't start until 11:30. The game got over like at 2 in the morning, and that was over 25 years ago. I mean, college football games are just way too long, and they need to dial it down a little bit because NFL games seem like they're over by 3 o'clock. I mean, or even before that. So the only gripe I have about that is college football is please find a way to make these games quicker, because everybody talks about how long baseball is and it's boring. No, you can get a good pitcher in there like Mark Burley of the White Sox years ago, who was able to get some games in less than 2 hours or around that point. It'd be great to go to a college football game or even watch a college football game and be able to enjoy it for 2 hours and go home, or go outside and cut your grass and there's still daylight out, because in the fall the sun goes down at 4 o'clock. But let's say if Notre Dame started at 1 o'clock today and the game was over at 4:30, it'd be dark. You wouldn't be able to do anything the rest of the night. It feels like you've spent your whole day watching football. But if it was over at 3 o'clock or 3:30, you still have a half an hour daylight out. You can still do stuff around the house, because today was actually a nice day. It was in the 70s. Now let's turn to B-Man's negativity of the game. And now listen, I'm not going to make excuses here tonight. I'm not going to go ahead and say, well, they were off for 3 weeks because of COVID-19 and they had to bust that rust off. Well, in that case, then why was the offense so great tonight? Yes, I know it was Florida State. So while those of you were saying, well, Brendan and B-Man, they only played Florida State. Their defense tonight, I hate to say this, and listen, I am being honest because, again, honest about the Irish, and I get criticized for being too negative. However, excuse me while as I bump the mic there, Notre Dame's defense got exposed tonight. Now listen, Florida State has better athletes than South Florida. Florida State has better athletes than Duke. Florida State has more speed than Duke and South Florida. But Notre Dame's tackling tonight was terrible. It was not good at all. And listen, Notre Dame had 2 turnovers. They had a fumble and had a muff punt. I get that. Turnovers keep the other team in the game. But just their fundamentals in tackling were absolutely terrible tonight. And they need to work on that. And Florida State looked really quick tonight. They looked really fast. Now, Florida State got blown out by Miami. And then, of course, they got by Jackson State last weekend. That was a tough game for them. It was a fight. So, like I said, Florida State is not what they used to be. But for some reason, Florida State just looked much quicker against Notre Dame. Now, I don't know if that's because Notre Dame is slow on defense, or or Florida State just has really fast athletes and Notre Dame was exposed. You don't know, because if this is a concurrent issue for Notre Dame, if this happens again next weekend against Louisville, then you know. So that's the tricky thing about football. Any given Sunday, they say in the NFL, it's the same for Saturdays in college football, any given Saturday. So Louisville can come out next weekend and completely get blown out by Notre Dame 49-0, and they only have 90 yards total offense, or they can flip it around and have 500 total offense against Notre Dame and run up the score on Notre Dame and win like 42-14 or something. You just never know in college football with these offenses and these defenses, how they're feeling. It's momentum. But, however, I just was a little concerned about Notre Dame's defense, and I'm going to be a little concerned against when they play against Clemson, of course. We all know about Clemson and Trevor Lawrence. And also North Carolina. Mac Brown has done an excellent job down there in North Carolina. That game, of course, is the Friday after Thanksgiving. And like I said before, that's a game that scares the shit out of me. And those are two games that if Notre Dame can get past Clemson, then Notre Dame can get past North Carolina. I believe that they'll be able to play. They could play against anybody in the country. The North Carolina game, of course, is out there in North Carolina. So we'll just have to see. That's about a month and a half away. But Notre Dame just needs to work on their tackling. And, after that first quarter when they were down 17-14, B-Man was like, oh, shit. It's going to be one of those games where Notre Dame gets upsetted. And you kind of knew that eventually Florida State was going to play against a team that they were picked to lose by 3 touchdowns. Notre Dame was picked to win by 3 scores today, guys. They were 21-point favorite over Florida State. And I felt after that first quarter, this is going to be one of those games where Florida State either squeaks by like 35-31 or Notre Dame squeaks by like 38-35. But fortunately, Notre Dame was able to catch their breath and start over in the second half. Notre Dame did play a little better in the second half, but their tackling was still a little poor. You just felt like Florida State was in this game all the way up until the fourth quarter. Notre Dame missed a field goal there by Dorr. But Florida State had a lot of opportunities tonight. They had that terrible, crucial interception at the goal line, and that was pretty much the dagger for the game. But Florida State did have their chances tonight, and it's a little concerning to me. And Notre Dame just needs to work on their poor tackling and maybe the fundamentals of their defense, because if they play like this against Louisville next week, and again, if it's 2 weekends in a row, I'm going to be a little concerned. And I know I'm a pessimist, guys. I'm a little negative all the time. That's the point. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, Notre Dame looks great tonight on defense. They're going to be the national championship. No, I'm not delusional. So work on their defense, tackle better. And the special teams, by the way, tonight were absolutely awful. Running into each other, a muff punt. It just did not look good tonight in special ed. So they need to clean up the special eds. I said special ed. I'm sorry. Special teams. I'm getting a little distracted here by my phone. Special eds. But special teams looked very terrible tonight. But, running into each other, and then it did not look good tonight. So work on special teams. Work on their defense. Work on their tackling, because you kept Florida State in this game for a while. And Florida State, like I said, had their opportunities. So next weekend's game, of course, is on NBC. That game is on 1:30 Central Time. Notre Dame takes on Louisville. Notre Dame will be picked to win that game, I'm pretty sure, by at least 2 touchdowns, 2 scores. So we'll see how Notre Dame performs defensively against Louisville. I'm pretty sure Notre Dame's offensive line is going to be great, and the running attack is going to be great. And Ian Book, seems like Ian Book just gets better and better every game throughout every year that he's been there. And he's going to set some records, like they're saying, with the most wins at Notre Dame. I mean, I believe he's only had 2 or 3 losses in his career at Notre Dame. That's pretty impressive. So we'll have to stay tuned for next weekend, guys. Thanks again for joining me. Please like this video. Please dislike it. And what did we learn today? Well, we learned in positive, Notre Dame does have an offensive line that's great. Notre Dame does have a great rushing attack. Ian Book gets better and better. What was that we learned that was a little negative? The games are too long. Tom Brady is a bitch who doesn't know how to count because he went to the University of Michigan. That's not really a negative. That is a positive. And also, the biggest negative tonight's show, Notre Dame's defense. Did they make Florida State look fast, or is Florida State fast and Notre Dame's defense is just too slow? Or did Notre Dame just had a bad night in defense and they did not tackle very well? B-Man is a little concerned, but that's the biggest negative, and that's what we learned all 3 lessons tonight. And people, please don't take me too serious. It's all for fun. Believe me, if Notre Dame loses next weekend to Louisville and it's a bad game, they look terrible, you're going to hear a lot of cussing. And let's hope that doesn't get that way. Let's hope that Notre Dame finishes here undefeated and they go to the national championship and they beat whoever it is they play. If they play Clemson twice and beat them twice, which would be a miracle, and that won't happen. Or if they play Alabama after beating Clemson, it'd be great. But I am not a delusional Notre Dame fan. I am pretty sure Notre Dame, they might lose 2 games this year, but you know what? That's pretty impressive. So that's what I've accepted. And I'm not going to be delusional. Again, folks, please like this video. Please dislike it if you have to. A little feedback would be nice. And please subscribe to my channel if you are new. Once again, the final score from South Bend, Notre Dame 42, Florida State 26. Notre Dame improves to 3-0. And of course, Florida State falls to 1-3. Thanks again, folks. Have a good night. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and go Irish.